Hello and welcome to World News Tonight here on TVP World. I'm Anna Jabłońska. Our main focus tonight is the heightened tensions in the Middle East, which threaten to ignite a broader conflict in the region. We will also talk about Kamala Harris's running mate and his foreign policy views and more. Now let's take a look at the headlines. Poland's border crossings with Belarus will open under one condition. Andrzej Poczobut must be returned to Poland. Sources both from Russia and Ukraine report that a force of several hundred soldiers have crossed the border into the Kursk region. And Polish speed climber Aleksandra Mirosław has secured the first gold medal for Poland during Paris Olympics. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said several of Poland's broader border crossings with Belarus won't be open until Andrzej Poczobut is released from prison. The Polish activist, along with several others, has been jailed by the Minsk regime since 2021.
Minister Sikorski commented on Andrzej Poczobut and the border crossings in an interview for independent Belarusian media outlet Zwierkało.
The opening date for the border crossings depends on the length of Andrzej Poczobut's imprisonment. It takes two to tango.
The Polish conservative opposition has recently questioned the government's attempts to release Poczobut and other jailed Polish activists. Politicians from the Law and Justice Party have said Andrzej Poczobut should have been swapped with a Russian spy, released in a recent prisoner exchange between the United States, Belarus and Russia.
The facts are that one Russian spy is no longer in our prison, but we don't have Mr. Poczobut with us either.
Members of the ruling coalition snapped back at the opposition's accusations.
We all want Andrzej Poczobut to be free. That's obvious to everyone. We are doing what we can through the foreign ministry. The Law and Justice Party failed to achieve anything on that front for the past 3 years, since Poczobut was jailed.
Currently, only a single crossing in Terespol is open to regular travelers. The crossing in Kukuryki is also open, but only for the transit of goods. All other crossings have been closed since 2021. The closing of the borders was Poland's reaction to hybrid attacks from the regime in Minsk. The Belarusian services have been sending waves of aggressive migrants to the Polish, Latvian and Lithuanian borders for the past 3 years, in an attempt to destabilize NATO's eastern flank.
Democrats across the United States are celebrating the choice of Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, for Kamala Harris's running mate. However, the appointment came with its own set of questions. Will he be able to sway voters in swing states? And what are his views on foreign policy?
Sometimes life is as much about the lessons you learn as the lessons you teach.
Tim Walz, former military man, teacher, and current governor of Minnesota, is hailed as one of the best choices for Kamala Harris's running mate by analysts and members of the Democratic Party.
I think it's as strong a team as the Democrats could have hoped for. When Kamala Harris burst onto the scene 2 weeks ago at the top of the ticket, she had a sense of enthusiasm and optimism and electricity that we haven't seen in presidential politics in quite some time. And Tim Walz has those same kinds of qualities.
Latest nationwide polls show that Kamala Harris and her Republican rival Donald Trump are neck and neck, with the former securing a small lead in recent days. Given these numbers, the November elections will most likely be decided by how the swing states vote. The three most important swing states for Harris to win are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, with the first showing the Democrat candidate up 0.8% over Trump. In Wisconsin, Kamala Harris is seeing a 1.4% lead, and polls from Michigan hint at a possible Democrat victory, with Harris receiving 1.6% more support than Donald Trump. However, these numbers don't mean Kamala Harris is sure to take the swing states. That's where Tim Walz comes in, who was chosen as Harris's running mate with one goal in mind: to sway undecided voters in these battleground states towards the Democrats. Since the impact of the US presidential elections extends far beyond just the United States, onlookers from outside the country have been wondering what the views of the VP candidate are regarding foreign affairs, mainly the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine.
In comparison to other governors, he is apparently one of the most pro-Ukrainian governors. At least that is how the Ukrainian ambassador, Oksana Makarova, in Washington, has characterized him.
His opinion of Hungarian PM Viktor Orbán, a notorious opponent of providing military aid to Ukraine, who was called the dictator by Waltz, also shows what side of the Ukrainian war the VP candidate chooses to stand on. While Waltz hasn't been vocal when it comes to his stance on Central Europe and NATO's eastern flank, that doesn't mean he's only interested in domestic issues.
He may have actually, according to these sort of facts about his biography, a better understanding of international affairs than the average U.S. governor.
Despite his scarce takes on foreign affairs, one thing is clear. Kamala Harris, who still serves as VP to President Joe Biden, shares the sitting president's opinions that NATO's eastern flank should be strong, suggesting that Tim Waltz agrees with that vision too.
We win.
Since taking over the rotating presidency of the EU barely a month ago, Hungary's Viktor Orbán has been causing controversy. Now the world is looking with concern at Hungary itself, where a controversial new law could be used to silence opposition voices.
From China to Russia and the US, Viktor Orbán has been busy selling his vision for politics, one centered around nation-states and sovereignty, and one that puts him increasingly at odds with Brussels and other European leaders. As Orbán seeks to gain prominence with authoritarian leaders abroad, he's also clamping down on critical voices like media outlets and NGOs back home. The controversial Sovereignty Protection Office, which has the power to call in intelligence services without any judicial oversight, currently has 2 entities in its sights, and the investigation is far from routine.
They requested public data about who our donors are and what these donors fund at Átlátszó, but they also requested sensitive data like grant agreements or bank account ledgers. So, I mean, I could compare it to an auditing process.
Hungarian parliament adopted the so-called Defense of National Sovereignty law in December of 2023, which serves as the backbone to the SPO. The controversial state body has not gone unnoticed by Brussels, which opened an infringement procedure in February of this year. Despite the outrage, no concrete steps have been taken since. According to Commission sources, the Parliament is currently analyzing its next steps, leaving the NGOs in uncertainty and fear.
Beforehand, these sanctionings were more like rhetorical. So we had verbal bashing, we had smear campaigns, we had the discreditation of our reputations and the credibility that we show was thrown into disrepute. Now there's a potential that all this is going to happen on a legal terrain, which is much more frightening.
Given that the 2 NGOs, as well as others like them, may well face more restrictions and the prospect of donors leaving Hungary or being scared off, those under investigation are sticking to defiance.
We are more determined and we will not stop unless they freeze the bank accounts or dissolve our organization.
As Viktor Orbán's recent foreign journeys rile up Western leaders, this may well embolden him to shut down critical voices at home. And although things may not be as bad as in Russia yet, the confusion and intimidation may prove just as effective.
Ukraine's surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region continues. The attack has prompted Vladimir Putin to convene a meeting with his top defense and law enforcement officials. Experts and military observers are trying to make sense of the attack.
Kursk is ablaze. For the 2nd day in a row, Ukrainian forces are storming the Russian region. Not much is known about the attack, but military experts and videos circulating online indicate that it might be the largest Ukrainian incursion to Russian territory to date.
Of the information we have right now, we can say that things are not going great for Russia, because usually when they employ attack helicopters, it means they need to respond quickly and they don't have any kind of reserves.
The Ukrainian side has not yet commented on the attack except confirmation that it was underway. A majority of communique comes from the Russian side.
The situation at the border in the Kursk region is currently tense. I constantly interact with security forces, the Ministry of Defense, and border guards. There are battles at the border.
Despite Russian claims that the attack was repelled, Vladimir Putin held a meeting with top officials. Official and unofficial sources, both from Russia and Ukraine, report that a force of several hundred soldiers had crossed the border. Reports suggest Ukrainian forces had advanced northwards, possibly as far as 15 kilometers from the border. The attack prompted a discussion about its reasonability. Some voices suggest that its aim was to divert Russian forces from other parts of the front line, but that might be unlikely.
Russia doesn't have a problem with manpower or equipment at the moment, as General Syrski said last week or the week before. I don't understand why this is happening. It seems to me a distraction. But the purpose of it is probably not military, I suppose, to the extent it can be rationalized at all.
Ukraine has carried out similar attacks twice in the past with little tactical gains, but the attack might be heralding something more.
I have a feeling that the Ukrainians have something up their sleeves in the next few months. I think there's a possibility that they are preparing for some form of counterattack.
As for now, battles are still raging, and full extent of the attack remains to be seen.
And joining us now live from Kiev with more is our correspondent Oz Karagi. Good evening, Oz. Now, has there been any comment from Kiev yet on the Kursk incursion?
No, still tight-lipped from Kiev here. Understandably, this is not the first time something similar has happened, but this is something much larger than has been seen before. Now, I spoke to an analyst, Mykola Bieleskov, at the Come Back Alive Foundation, a senior analyst there, about what's going on in Kursk. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Right now, we can discuss only some hypotheses, suggestions. The most plausible one is with this limited action, with this incursion of limited scale, try to divert Russian attention from Pokrov's directions. That is most difficult one. So we are in such a situation when if you don't try, you don't know whether it's working or not. But if we manage to divert some Russian combat-proven formations from this direction to the Kursk region, that would be the best result possible.
So as we still haven't heard much from Kiev, all we can really glean from what's going on is what's being said by what's being available on social media, what's being said by Russian military bloggers, and what the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying. Now, yesterday, the Russian MOD said 300 Ukrainian soldiers had crossed into the border. Today, addressing Vladimir Putin, Valery Gerasimov said 1,000 Ukrainian troops have gone into the border. So you can see even from the Russian side, which is very common, you can't tell what really the truth is coming from there. With no comment from Kiev, it's quite difficult to ascertain just how large this is. But it is the second day now, and it's probably expected to continue into the third day. It said that Ukraine has captured about 350 square kilometers of land so far inside Russia. Now, if Russia's seeking at the moment to end the conflict on its own terms, freezing the conflict lines, the events of the last 48 hours by Ukraine have very much complicated that. Back to you in the studio.
Well, that is true, and they're probably they're keeping quiet for a reason. Oz, thank you very much. Stay safe, and we will talk to you soon. Now, the first partial report of the Polish Parliamentary Committee investigating Russian and Belarusian influence in the country is already on the Prime Minister's desk and will soon be made public. According to our source on the committee, not all the details of the work will be released to the public in the coming months.
TVP World's source says some reports will not be made public due to the EU's General Data Protection Regulation and the sensitive nature of the committee's work. According to our source, the final report could take several years to complete due to the broad range of investigations. The committee is investigating Russian and Belarusian influence over internal affairs and the security of Poland over the last 2 decades. This has been an especially hot topic ever since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Both sides of the Polish political scene have been exchanging accusations of Russian connections since then.
Polish television network TVN could go up for sale. The news comes amidst the financial struggles of parent company Warner Bros. Discovery.
TVN, one of the biggest players in Poland's TV market, could be among the assets marked for offloading by the Warner Bros. Discovery Group. The sale, according to reports cited by the Financial Times, sources familiar with the matter, would be a part of a restructuring program designed to prop up WBD's share price. It has been enacted because the media giant is struggling financially, and wants to avoid having to split back into two companies. Meant to strengthen Warner Bros.' position in the highly competitive streaming market, the merger has so far not brought the desired outcome. Since the merger in 2022, the company's shares have plummeted by nearly 70%. If the sale takes place, it will mark the third time TVN has changed ownership since 2018. It initially was part of Discovery, and following the merger became part of Warner Bros. Discovery Group. When asked for a comment by TVP World, Warner Bros. Discovery's office in Poland didn't respond.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced that ceasefire negotiations in the Middle East have entered a crucial final stage. Despite the claim, however, the situation continues to escalate. Both Iran and Hamas maintain a fierce reaction to the recent assassination of a Hamas leader.
As tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate to levels not seen in years, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has emphasized the intense work being undertaken to bring about a resolution.
We will continue to defend Israel against attacks from terrorist groups or their sponsors, just as we'll continue to defend our troops. But everyone in the region should understand that further attacks only perpetuate conflict, instability, insecurity for everyone.
After the recent killings of key figures from Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Iran, however, Iran, which blames Israel for the killings, called for an emergency meeting of Organization of Islamic Cooperation foreign ministers.
The recent events in Gaza and the assassination of the former Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, Sheikh Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran on Wednesday, 31st of July 2024, mark a significant escalation.
Both Iran and Hamas' new leader vowed the response to killings would be strong.
Right now, we're still in that kabuki theater stage where there's a lot of acting going on, but substantively, we've not seen a big uptick yet.
The Israeli Prime Minister, meanwhile, has urged Israel to stay calm.
We are prepared for both defense and offense. We are striking our enemies and are also determined to defend ourselves.
Inside Gaza, the situation remains tense. The urgency of the situation is underscored by the recent closure of the sole humanitarian corridor to Gaza's south due to continued fighting.
Only 4 days remain until the end of the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. Wednesday has already proven quite fruitful for Polish athletes, with more prospects for medals awaiting later in the evening.
After a nearly 2-week wait, Poland has finally secured its first gold medal in Paris. The win came from Polish speed climber Aleksandra Mirosław, who capped off her perfect display in the Paris Olympics with a stunning performance in the final.
A lot is happening right now in my head. I'm feeling so many emotions. They're just starting to show. I'm incredibly happy because all this hard work that I have put in with my team throughout the season was to be prepared for today. It paid off and we took the gold.
The Paris Games showcased the strength of Polish speed climbing in its full glory. Not only did Mirosław beat her own world record twice, setting the new best at 6.06 seconds, she was not the only Polish medalist. Aleksandra Kałucka, after losing to Mirosław in the semi-finals, comfortably won her third-place matchup, securing yet another bronze for Poland. But Poland's medal ambitions did not end there. In a thrilling semi-final, the Polish men's volleyball team faced off against the United States, trouncing the 3-time Olympic champions 3-2 in sets. The win puts Poland in the Olympic volleyball finals for the second time in history. Last but not least, Polish boxer Julia Szeremeta will fight in a semi-final later this evening. She will take on Tokyo Olympics silver medalist Nesty Petesio from the Philippines. Szeremeta is already guaranteed a bronze medal. Tonight's fight will determine whether she will be able to fight for more.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the United States has sent a direct message to Iran and Israel that the conflict in the Middle East must not escalate. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, ordered an attack on Israel. Khamenei said, "We consider revenge our duty," in response to the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Iranian capital. Now, for more on potential scenarios and threats to the Middle East, we will talk with our guest, Daniel Pipes, the president of the Middle East Forum think tank. Sir, thank you very much for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
So I would like to start with a very open and broad question. Would you say that the Middle East is the closest it has ever been to an all-out war? Because it was always close, but this time round, do you think it might happen?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I expect that the Iranians will be careful. Now, Iran is a country with significant military power, getting close to nuclear weapons, but faced with Israel, with some Arab states, and with the United States and a number of other Western powers, Iran doesn't have a chance. So I don't think they want a conventional war. Iran has specialized in irregular warfare, clandestine warfare. An overt conventional war, I just don't think the Iranians want that. Mm-hmm. So they'll kill people, they'll undermine governments and so forth, but an actual all-out war with Israel and its allies, I would be surprised.
But they have been doing that for a while, for years. It's not working. They have been going back and forth. Do you think it's time they're going to decide that it's time to show where the power is?
Well, what do they have? Do they have aircraft? Do they have ships? Do they have tanks? Mm-hmm. What they have are agents, operators, drones, missiles, but that's limited. You can't do that much. Mm-hmm. So I'd be surprised if this is an all-out conventional war.
Now, after Haniyeh was killed last week, Yahya Sinwar became a new Hamas leader.
Right.
And I came across this interesting comment from Rami Khoury, public policy fellow at the American University of Beirut. And he's talking about Israel assassinating yet another Hamas leader. He's saying they will probably try to assassinate more people, but it doesn't do any good. It's bizarre that the Israelis don't see that when they assassinate somebody, they get somebody more radical. Would you agree with that? I mean, first of all, would you agree with that? And who are we dealing with when it comes to Sinwar?
I don't know that there's more radical and less radical. Mm-hmm. What you have is someone who's dealing with military affairs, such as Sinwar, and you're someone who's dealing with international politics, like Haniyeh. I don't think one is more or less radical than the other, but they have different roles. I don't think Israel is paying a price so far. Sinwar ran the operation on October 7th. Haniyeh didn't know about it. He wasn't told, apparently. But he was the one trying to negotiate. I think the Israelis, if it was Israel, in executing Haniyeh, was sending a message to the leadership of Hamas, which historically has been privileged, has been away from the conflict. Many of them, like Haniyeh, live in Qatar, which is a very nice place to live, very affluent. Saying you are not going to be privileged. You are not safe. You're in danger. You can't just send other people's children. Your own children are in danger, and you are in danger. Mm-hmm. If that's going to work or not, I can't tell you, but it is an approach that makes sense, at least, unlike what the comment was, mm-hmm. which says it's just silly. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think it's silly. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't.
Now, what is Sinwar's role then?
Sinwar has been for some years now the head of military operations in Gaza, and now he's the head of the whole of Hamas. He's been, in effect, the leader. I mean, he is the one who planned and executed October 7th. He's the one who's been driving events in the Middle East. This really formalizes his existing powerful role. I don't think it makes much of a difference. He already had that power.
Now, Israel, to put it mildly, has a lot to deal with right now. Now, would you say that the threat from Hezbollah, from Iran, I mean, the whole chaos, is going to stop operations in Gaza?
The Israelis, or Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu in particular, has a dilemma. On the one hand, he himself appears to want to win, to gain a victory, to defeat Hamas, to eliminate Hamas. He has mentioned this, I've been counting, 60 and more speeches and statements. He keeps on talking about victory, total victory. He wears a little baseball cap with total victory. On the other hand, his foreign allies, in particular the U.S. government, don't want an all-out war and trying to get him to stop. And also his domestic opponents want to bring back the hostages and make that the most urgent priority. So he himself goes in one direction, his allies and his opponents, foreign allies, domestic opponents, want him to go in another direction. And he, so far, has been unclear. I think if it was the Israelis who were behind the execution of Hania in Tehran a week ago, that seems to indicate that he's going in the direction of victory. It seems to be saying, sorry, Americans, sorry, domestic opposition, I hear you, but I'm going in this other direction. So I think he has made his mind to go for the destruction of Hamas and not getting back the hostages.
I do want to ask you about hostages in just a second, but when we are talking about the destruction of Hamas, realistically, is it possible to destroy Hamas? I mean, their leaders or their members of Hamas, I'm sure they're all over the world hiding, and just waiting for the call, perhaps when to attack next and where to attack next.
In 1945, if I'd said I want to destroy the Nazis, would you have said to me there are Nazis all over the world? Yeah, there are, but you can, Argentina, Japan,
so you just need to
Hungary, Italy, allies, but you can still
destroy. But it's the core we're talking about.
You can destroy the government, you can destroy the governing authority, and then they're much weaker. So nobody is under the illusion that destroying Hamas as a political governing institution will eliminate every Hamas supporter or sympathy for Hamas, but it will hugely decrease the power. Same thing with the Soviet Union.
Well, it's about the motivation that they have from their leader. I mean,
plenty of communists after 1991, but
they're still around.
Still around.
Now, speaking about the hostages, there are approximately 120 hostages. Now, how is this situation affecting their situation and the negotiations?
We don't know. Apparently, they're very unpleasant circumstances. Being harmed and purposely make life extremely uncomfortable. But there are two ways of approaching this. One is to say the best thing for them is to strike a deal, even if this means ending hostilities and allowing Hamas to continue. Or the other is make it so painful for Hamas that these hostages are no longer valuable. I mean, in some ways, the hostages are more valuable than the deaths. Deaths are over. Hostages go on and on and on. I belong to the second school of thought. Don't make hostages your priority. Make defeating Hamas your priority, and then the hostages will, in all likelihood, be released.
But I'm sure Hamas, the leaders, see that the whole world is talking about hostages, that the whole world is putting pressure on Netanyahu when it comes to hostages, so this might hurt. I'm not even talking about the people themselves and the families, but when it comes to negotiations, they might just stop the negotiations just to make Netanyahu feel the pain when it comes to the world.
I don't think it's a good idea in any circumstance to make hostages the goal. In an American context, I ask people, what if Pearl Harbor, which was only deaths, no hostages, but what if it had been hostages? What if the Japanese had come and taken a few hundred American hostages? Would the goal of the United States in World War II have been to release the hostages? Would that make sense? No.
No, you're right. Now, the U.S. administration, some say that they lost control over its ally. I'm talking about Israel, meaning that Washington has limited, if any, impact when it comes to what is happening in the Middle East, especially with Israel. What's your take on that?
Israel and the United States are very different countries. The United States is over 30 times larger in population. Very different interests. There have always been tensions, always. Probably the least tensions were during the Clinton and Rabin era in the 1990s. But overall, it's been tension, 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 and now it's tension again, so nothing new. Nothing to be particularly surprised or upset about.
Well, with this, we have to end our conversation. Thank you very much, sir, for shedding light on the very complex situation of the Middle East. And thank you for watching World News Tonight. Stay with us for more news and comments here on TVP World.